Beck throws, completes. Jaden Higgins, he's got room to run. Touchdown, Cyclones!
Welcome in. Thanks again for tuning in. You are listening to the Cyclone Fan Perspective as we break down every Iowa State football game from previews to recaps. It has finally came. The final game for Iowa State in 2023 has come to an end. Unfortunately, not the result we were looking for, but we're still here to talk about it, and we got to get into some little off-season stuff and kind of where we go from here. I'm joined by my brother, as always, JT. I'm Jake, a part of the Play the Fight Song podcast. As always, tune into our episodes every Thursday where we talk all things college football. Justin, 2023 did not end the way we wanted to as Iowa State fans, but 2024, as far as college football is concerned, is off to a great start. You came on this little recap or preview last week and pretty much nailed it on the head when we were talking the college football playoff games. So any thoughts from the bowl games as they kind of are wrapping up here, or just the college football playoff games in general before we get into Iowa State?
Well, I wish I could have predicted the Iowa State game as well as I predicted the games yesterday, but no, I've just basically been watching all the games this weekend, and I don't know. I did a pretty good job for myself. I had a little parlay going yesterday, hit all the games, so that was good. And outside the Iowa State game, there's a lot of good football on, so can't complain.
I gotta know what made you. Well, you told us why, but what to pick both Michigan and Washington. I don't know too many people that really did that. I'm gonna be honest with you. So you got it. Did you know something like what?
I was a little worried about the Michigan game, and I kept getting worried about the Michigan game. But honestly, Bama didn't look that good all year, and they showed up and played really well against Georgia. But I just felt like Michigan was still the more consistent team, so I stuck with them. And I don't know, Washington's just been underrated all year. Texas has been good, but their best part of their team is their D-line. And Washington's O-line won like the O-line of the year award. I don't know the name of the award, but I knew they had that. And I don't know, I watched Iowa State pass the ball all over them in person. I mean, not necessarily all over them because I think Texas kind of wanted that, but Washington's passing game is very underrated, clearly, after putting up the performance they had yesterday.
What made me kind of think of, and this will kind of lead into the bowl game, if Iowa State had thrown the ball as many times as they did, and they should have thrown it more in the Liberty Bowl, if they had thrown that many times against Texas, I think that would have increased our chances. Not that we were way out talented in that game. From the start, it was very apparent. But if we just gave up on the run game in general, like we should have in the bowl game, I don't know. Maybe that Texas game would have been a little different result. Watching last night, granted, we do not have Michael Penix Jr. by any means. And I'm sorry, Jaden Higgins is not Rome Odunze, but the writing was on the wall for Texas. And I thought that was interesting. Let's move off of that then, because that playing style that Washington presented against Texas, Iowa State kind of did in their bowl game, and it was only because they had to in unforeseen circumstances. Let's get into it right away. Iowa State, they fall to Memphis 26-36 in the Liberty Bowl. Despite some historic performances from our freshman quarterback in Rocco Beck and receiver Jaden Higgins, that was really the only highlight of the day, and it kind of just showed up too late. Iowa State gets down to a 19-0 lead or deficit. Memphis comes out and really, really wanted to play in that football game. I think that's a team that they're both programs are playing for a lot next year. But the talk going into the pregame before the Liberty Bowl was, you heard the word playoff come out of really both schools' mouths. One in Jeremiah Cooper, and we'll talk about that for more offseason stuff. But Memphis also talked about they think they're going to be that group of 5 team that gets into the playoff as an automatic qualifier next year. And they were really looking to springboard into 2024. That's really kind of what stood out to me. I think that was a team that wanted to play in front of their home fans. And they kind of came and punched us in the mouth. I don't know what you kind of thought as a whole, Justin, or really not the bad start in particular.
Yeah, when we were, I believe the last pod we did the preview, we kind of questioned like how much this game was going to mean to both teams. We're like, oh, those guys are playing for a 10-win season. Like, I'm sure that's pretty big for them. But outside of that, who knows? And Yeah, I don't know. You could just watch the game, and we could not have been more wrong. Those guys came
Mm.
out ready to play way more than Iowa State did, which
Mhm.
I was a little concerned with them being a young team coming off that big K-State win and that long break. What kind of version of a team we could get coming in this Liberty Bowl? And yeah, that first quarter was just too much for us to overcome.
I think we chatted back and forth through text messages and the casual word on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it is that Iowa State didn't want to be there. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's a fair argument. I think complacent might be a good word when you're coming off of such a big win. God, what seems like a year ago now in Manhattan where we rushed for over 250 yards. I think complacent was the word because we came out slow. We tried to run the football. We thought we were going to play that smash mouth style of play, that phone booth football. And Memphis just said, no, you're not doing that. We still have really good athletes. And on the other side, we talked about two things. We talked about, are we going to try to dominate the run game? And then number two, we didn't know if TJ Tampa was going to play. And then we also forgot that Malik Verdone has been battling something that apparently is just going to be an offseason thing, and he's going to try to get better for next year, which is perfectly fine. But Javonte Williams and Drew Surgis, they saw it right away. You know, Seth Hennigan and Ryan Silverfield, they saw what we had on defense with two young guys in the secondary. Our defensive line has not created pressure all year, and they went after us right away. It was a really I knew we talked about how Memphis had athletes, but I think looking back on it, we really underestimated some of the bad matchups Memphis presented. But I will say there's no reason this team rushes for literally. I rushed for more yards sitting on my couch on last Friday. I mean, it was ridiculous to go against the 102nd worst rush defense in the country and a rush for not even a single yard. That bothers me, and I know it bothers everybody else. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I don't know. The 0 rush yards against a group of 5 team, they could be the best group of 5 team in the country. 0 rush yards against 0 rush yard. I don't want to disrespect Memphis. 0 rush yards against any team is like
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. I mean, I don't even know how to describe
I
it.
think it's
There was
unacceptable.
there was
I
no
don't.
push. Honestly, Abu looked slow. I
Mhm.
don't even know what it was. Like, I don't want to just say like, oh, the effort wasn't there because I don't really think that was true. It's just like I think we underestimated how good Memphis was, and we just I don't know. I don't know if it was a game plan or what it was, but that definitely can't happen. And honestly, this game reminded me a lot of the Kansas game,
Yeah.
where we
Mhm.
knew the other team was good, but I'm not sure we really recognized how good they were. And we were kind of coming off a high, and we just weren't really ready in the first quarter. And I mean, it came back and bit us in the ass.
I think the Kansas game is an exact replica of what we saw last week. And it just made it worse that they were playing a home game, which is fine. We've done it before. Like I'm not complaining that we had to travel to Memphis to play them. But we had Kansas at home, and I felt like that's what kept us in the game a majority of the time in November. Whereas our backs were against the wall right away, and their fans were jacked up from everything that I heard.
Mhm.
I think you're exactly right. The Kansas game, Memphis, both have good quarterbacks, both have good athletes on the offensive side of the ball. We saw it as this is a bad rush defense. We're going to try to out physical them on the offensive line or the defensive line with what we got, and it just didn't work. That was really disappointing. Yeah, I thought Abu was a little slow. We didn't really give Carson Hansen a chance to run the football, which I was disappointed with, especially when you're in a
Yeah,
bowl game.
I thought he was
Everybody
gonna
wants to
push
say
it a little more.
he pass protected well. Like he was in, they trust him to pass protect more than Abu if you really pay attention to it. And then AJ Harris again doesn't play, which is whatever. He hasn't played all year, but I was like, I don't know, it's a bowl game. We can't rush for anything. We might as well try all of the running backs while we're out there. And we kind of did nail it on the head as far as predicting it. From our conversation in the preview, I said, I don't care if we do rush for 0 yards. Well, I ate crow on what I had to say. I said, I want to see us go out there and try to assert our dominance to give us more motivation heading into the offseason because you know what? I think Matt Campbell is pissed. I think Clanton is pissed. I think the strength and conditioning coach is pissed. They're tired of getting this is the second time this year where we got bullied by a below average G5 defense. Ohio did it against us. Memphis did it against us. If we can't push against those guys, we got a long ways coming into next year when the new Big 12 rolls around. I have a theory on it, especially with our entire offensive line coming back, but I just think that was a good wake-up call. I don't want to say bowl games don't matter because they do. And this is exactly why they matter. They're good learning points into going into next year. I think that it will come as a good motivation going into the offseason, whether it's recruiting, whether it's just pushing the guys that we already have. I don't know. Will this someday, when we look back on it next September, maybe next October, that this 0-yard rushing performance will be a good thing?
I think that's really the only way you can spin it, because if things don't improve, like, we're really going to struggle next year. I know we're going to get into next year and all of that, but honestly, the schedule and everything, it's not really going to get much easier. Like, this team's going to have a lot of hype in the offseason just because of how many guys they're bringing back. But they're still, like, this game was a huge red flag into a lot of areas that we need to prove. Offensive line, obviously, defensive line, and secondary for sure. Like, we looked so vulnerable in the secondary again. And that was something that was really disappointing.
I think it's disappointing, but I think John Haycock, I trust him. I think you need to put your guys through spring ball in an entire fall camp. Like Drew Surgis and Javonte Williams are two true freshmen who I think are going to learn. And they had 15 practices, and they're kind of like, well, you're going to go against probably the best passing G5 team in the country. Good luck. So I'm a little more understanding, but guess what? If we're going to pick apart something and I'm going to gripe about something, it's that we didn't give those guys any damn help because we had zero pressure from our defensive line. We continue. I'm interested to see how next year goes because we have added a guy through the transfer portal on the defensive line. I like to see it, but are we going to stick to the dime stack? Are we going to stick to a 3-man front? Because that defensive line that I saw this year, I'm not 100% sure they can create pressure that will lead to success for our defense next year. I don't know. The defensive line was the most disappointing thing to me. I don't know if there was another group or another player position that kind of was a little disappointing.
No, the D-line's been disappointing all year, honestly. Like, I mean, they haven't been able to generate any pressure on their own. And I mean, I think that points back to, like, we've been kind of spoiled with some of, like, the guys we've had. We've had some really good groups. Obviously, Will McDonald being a first-round pick last year kind of highlights that. But I don't know. I didn't really feel like we were trying to bring, like, the dime stack and the 3-5 that we run. Like, the big thing is generating pressure, bringing different kind of guys, bringing different linebackers and stuff. And it didn't really feel like we were trying to do that as much. I don't know if we were afraid of their pass game or something else, but yeah, it just didn't really feel like we were helping them out either. Just sending 3 guys and expecting them to get pressure. I mean, it's still a pretty tall ask.
That you can't rely on those young guys in the secondary to hold their own for that long. I think that I wish I would have seen more blitzes in the second half. And I think that was the one thing I had all year. I go back to the Iowa game, for instance, and I know that was so long ago, but we finally got after a limited Cade McNamara when we started bringing pressure, and we didn't do it until like the fourth quarter. I would like to see us bring more pressure in 2024 if we're talking scheme wise. But I love the defense we run. And I think John Haycock is one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. I would just like us to blitz a little more. What does that look like? Do we have the personnel to do it? I don't know. But maybe we give this group another year. There are familiar faces coming back at every single position, and we'll talk about that as well. But I want to highlight some stats before we.
I do have one more thing, Nat, on the defense. I love Heathcock. I love Heathcock's defense too, and obviously we've had a bunch of success with it over the years. But do you think there could be at any point, like how earlier in the year we realized we need to switch some things up with the offense and be a little more aggressive? Do you think with the younger team, lack of experience, we kind of little too rigid on defense and need to kind of be a little more aggressive with our schemes to help the guys out? Because I think a lot of the time early in the season, we really benefited whenever we were able to generate turnovers. And it's pretty obvious if we never forced a turnover, we didn't really win any of those games. And I think being a little more aggressive and switching things up a little bit could benefit us a lot. Because I haven't seen us tackle that bad either as a defense.
That was a good point.
Like we said, I don't want to blame that on defense, but I don't know. And we're not losing the defense. Obviously, it's one game, it's a bowl game, but I think it is some sort of a sign that maybe we need to change things up a little bit.
Tackling is definitely something that needs to be improved upon. I think this is the worst tackling group in Haycock's tenure since he's been here. Um, you're right. It's weird because it's usually a bend don't break defense, but this year kind of did rely on creating turnovers. I mean, we were top 10 in picks for a reason. But to your
Mhm.
point, I think it also depends on personnel. In this day and age in college football, we can change our entire depth in just a matter of one offseason, and we'll get to that in the portal and who they're offering and who they're going after. I think it's just a matter of adding depth. I do like Tyler Onyetum. I do like Ike Eziagu. I think he's going to be really good one day. He's long. They think he's like a Will McDonald kind of guy, just an under the radar recruit who's like a stud basketball player. And I would like to see more from J.R. Singleton and Dominic Orange in the middle. I think given those two, I think that entire defensive line can grow. And I would try again. I would stick to the same thing next year. Now, if it doesn't work next year, then we'll switch it up. But hopefully we get the three-headed monster back in Cooper, Verdone, and Purchase, and Bo Freiler, I should say, add to that. So if we can stay healthy, I think you stick to what you're really good at. I think they can figure it out. But if it doesn't work and maybe we do get dealt with injuries, I would look at changing it up. But let's talk about the stats before we get out of here, before we conclude on this game and move on to 2024. Memphis had 530 total yards, 364 passing yards, and 166 running yards. You know, I was really impressed with Blake Washington. I think I can understand where they're coming from, where they do think he's a modern day running back. He catches the ball really well. He's a pretty quick little running back. So I don't think this was a terrible loss for Iowa State. There are some really good, talented players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. A lot to move on to. And so leading with that, let's kind of talk about the offseason. Uh, we want to keep this short. I think we do want to have some offseason actual podcasts and videos for you guys leading up to next year. So we won't go totally into it, but let's kind of highlight where Iowa State is moving on to before classes start again next month. Senior guard Jarrett Hufford's coming back. I think that's a good thing. Whether or not he starts next year, we've seen seniors and juniors kind of who have had a ton of starting experience for Matt Campbell kind of get benched. You know, you saw it with Daryl Simmons. We've seen it with guys like Sean Foster, guys who have a ton of starts under the belt. If they're not performing, you know, I don't think they're afraid to shy away from it. But a senior guy who's started over 30 games, you can't complain when he wants to come back and try to help out this offensive line. You talk about him, that means that the entire offensive line is coming back for next year. I'm going to talk about some of the guys we've offered through the portal already, but Iowa State has not offered one offensive lineman through the portal besides maybe an FCS guy. No offensive linemen have committed so far. Justin, we have the same 5 coming back next year. There's some more depth. They're bringing in 2 twins that are freshmen that I like, that I think could be good in the long run. But is this a group you just stick with the same 5 and move on to 2024 and just try to improve? You give Ryan Clanton another year as offensive line coach. This will be his second year. Now he's got these guys kind of groomed to how he wants them. Maybe he gets an off season with them with the weight room and stuff like that. Iowa State finishes the 102nd rushing offense in college football. Do you stick with the same 5 guys next year, or do you look to move some pieces around? Is a portal guy an option? What do you think?
I mean, I think every team in the country would, if it was possible, I think every team in the country would like to rebuild their O line through the portal. I just
Yep.
don't really think that's much of an option. I mean, O linemen and D linemen are not really guys bouncing around in the portal unless it's like top end guys for money reasons. I mean, it's
Yep.
not really, yeah, it's just not really a thing. I think we don't really have a choice other than building through what we have. And
Mhm.
this is honestly a situation where I feel like we have been in a lot of the past couple of years where, oh, we're like, oh, bringing the whole line back, but just really hasn't been the improvement. I am optimistic with Ryan Clanton being around now. I think we did make a step forward this year, and he's shown he's a
Absolutely.
proven coach. Where, I mean, that's where the improvement's got to be. It's got to be with a second year coach, all the guys in there for another year. I mean, we've got to one of these off seasons really improve, because it just hasn't really happened in Campbell's tenure, honestly.
I think this is what my opinion. If you can add one or two FCS linemen that we can afford, because we're not, like you said, we don't have the collective to go out there and purchase linemen. But I think you add one or two FCS linemen, you bring them in. If they can start for you, great. If not, it doesn't hurt to add depth in dudes who have been around in college football. I don't even care if it's
Absolutely.
the FCS level. But here's what I think. Next year, I don't care if we're beaten up on the defensive line during spring ball, fall camp, whatever it is. I do not care. Iowa State cannot succeed in this day and age with developing offensive line. I think Clan's a good coach. I think he's really good. I think there are times where they made a ton of space for our running backs to score. You look at Cartavius Norton against Baylor, Abu Sama against Kansas State and BYU. Cincinnati, I think Eli Sanders had a nice game. There is a key to run the football well, but it has got to start with short passing next year. I do not care if we play a team of the blind who gives up 400 yards on the ground every single game. I think you need to go into every game thinking we are going to start off with a short pass. We have a fantastic quarterback and good wide receivers, and then we will let the run game come to fruition. That's what I don't want to see this. I don't know what the naiveness is like, where they're naive to think we can out scheme or outpower a UCF next year, somebody we might see. Like, it's just not going to happen. I don't see it happening. They could have a great offseason, but until then, and until we can prove otherwise, I think every game's got to start with short passing. I don't care if you bring back Abu Sama.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't want to say like we just want to start running the air raid and like speeding the tempo and all that. But you're completely right. We do need to play to our strengths more. And I think that could contribute to the defense too. Like, I just think this whole last couple of years, I mean, we need to change the way, not change the way fully, but just need to be a little more aggressive and lean into our strengths a little more. I think we definitely need to improve on the lines, but it just bashing our head into the wall over and over again has not worked. And I think that bowl game like finally cemented that.
I really hope so. And I think college football coaches are they're very stubborn people. They're where they are for a reason, and they know so much more than I do, but they're very stubborn people. But I think, like you said, 0 rushing yards is a tale. And I don't want to go back over to that game, but I think that's a tale of going into the offseason with the same offensive line. They pass protect decent. I will give them that. Like James Neal and Tyler Miller, just for an example, as offensive tackles in a Power 5 conference, they are not strength guys. You will not give them to your running back and expect them to go smash a defensive end in the mouth. But they're long, they're kind of quick on their feet, and when you ask them to give Rocco Beck time, that's when they're at their best. And I think that's what we got to lean on. You look at a guy like Jim Boniface at the center position. I love him. I think he's really smart. I think he's a good player. But I'm sorry, he's a very undersized center. I think he can start for you. But guess what? We're not going to – Abu Sama is not Breece Hall. I want to make that super clear. He's not going to make 4 or 5 yards out of nothing. You have to give him opportunities, and I think it just starts with the short passing game. You're right. It's not an air raid thing. It's got to be short passes for me, because it is a version of the run in the modern day of college football.
Yeah, it is. And I'm really excited for, honestly, a second year of Nate Shieldhouse. I'm excited to see what they're going to do, how they're going to call plays, the schemes they're going to draw up. I think with the roster that we have, I think like more RPO action, honestly, could benefit us a lot. Getting kind of disguising the run a little bit, open it up with the pass, giving Abu a little more space, some lanes, instead of him getting hit behind the line by a group of 5 team every play. I think that could be very beneficial for everybody.
That being said, let's talk about it. I want to talk about the transfer portal news. If you're an Iowa State fan and you're expecting us to be like Colorado and Deion Sanders, you're going to be vastly disappointed, because that's just not the way this team recruits. Iowa State is ranked last in the 247 rankings in the Big 12 for transfer portal. That's because they have 1 commit. However, Iowa State's done this. Jaden Higgins is a great example. They don't go after a ton of guys, but they go after guys that are going to help. LaMichael Petway a couple of seasons ago from Arkansas, and I'm like, who is Mevis? Andrew Mevis a couple of years. Like they bring in these guys. They don't bring in a ton. They might bring in 3, 4, 5 transfers, but they're usually expected to start. Colby Reeder out of Delaware at linebacker last year. Like they're not going to bring in dudes who are just going to maybe fill a spot and they might fit in, they might not. No, like Campbell's going to bring in these guys and they're going to fit. So let's start out with that. They bring in Kennard Snyder. He's a defensive end from UL Monroe. He's a normal 3-star guy, but I think he can be a fantastic development guy for you. I love this pickup. I absolutely love it. I think he was an honorable mention Sunbelt guy. This is what I talked about all season. This defensive line needs depth. You're looking at a defensive line or the defensive edge in particular next year with Joey Peterson, this Kennard Snyder. Now you have Tyler Onyetum and you have Ike Ezeagu. Those are 4 guys you can rotate in a dime stack. I absolutely love this pickup, and they don't seem to be done either because here are some of the offers. They went after UCF's defensive end that just went in the portal, I think a couple days ago, and Joshua Celciar, if I said that right. He's a 3-star guy. He's already got Big 12 experience coming out of UCF. Obviously, it's pretty telling that they do want to reload this defensive line. I think they're not, Justin, I said this before, they're way smarter than we are. They're not dumb to what they saw. I think they are recognizing that this defensive line is good, but It needs help and it needs to be pushed. So I don't know. Out of those, I think that's pretty telling to pick up one guy so far. I think he's going to have a major impact next year on the defensive line. The last couple of offers that Iowa State has done, they've only offered like 5 guys. Penn State wide receiver Christian Driver. He had like 1 catch as a freshman. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. He is the son of Packers receiver Donald Driver, if that like rings a name to any of you like Madden 2005 players. He's got some NFL blood in his DNA. He's a Penn State guy. I trust this offer out of Campbell. I don't think this would be a guy that would just come in and we're like wondering what's going on, or like the Iowa situation with Caleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer. Like, why is he not playing? I trust Campbell way more. I'm going to be honest. I think if he would come in, he would be a huge help. They offered a Michigan quarterback in Cameron Calhoun. They're going after big names. Like this Calhoun kid, again, like Driver, a young kid who hasn't played yet, but to offer a Michigan State and a Michigan and a Penn State guy, that's pretty unheard of for Iowa State. They offered a Nevada safety in Richard Toney Jr. This guy I'm excited about. This was a late offer. This is easily the best offer in his list. His other offers are, I believe, Louisiana Tech, Virginia, and maybe another small Power 5 school. I think Iowa State's going to get this guy. I know nothing. I have no intel. Don't take me for that.
I know nothing.
But from what I saw, I really have a hunch that this is a good pickup. I think the staff is really going to sell him on like, dude, our safeties and our defensive backs are going to be loaded next year. He had, I think, 67 tackles in his career, 2 interceptions. So this guy's played a lot of reps for Nevada. So I would love if he got, that would be a huge pickup for the defense. And lastly, if you've been on X, the rumors swirling around, former 5-star wide receiver Bryson Rogers out of Ohio State has entered the portal. I mean, we saw this with like Kyle McCord going to Nebraska, so I'm not going to take it for much of what it is. He was a teammate of Rocco Beck at Wiregrass Ranch. He tweeted a quote tweet of Rocco Beck saying 2024 is going to be fun. The guy tweeted like 5 times in his whole Twitter profile. So for him to respond, am I just being a loser for kind of selling this? Or this has got to be at least a little bit, right?
No, I think anybody can get excited about that. If you don't get excited about like news like that, then you're not a fan. I know like Iowa State fans were giving Iowa fans shit last year for all the transfer guys they're bringing in, but like, I don't know, it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting time of the year. I think that would obviously be a huge pickup for us. If we can pick up a third effective receiver along with Bramer next year, that would be huge for our offense, even more so with like the passing attack that we were talking about before. But I think the biggest thing is shoring up that D line and that secondary. If we can get that safety from Nevada and maybe pick up another D lineman, that would be the biggest thing for us. So like, I don't really want to put a whole lot of stock in the receiver, but obviously that would be a pretty big pickup for us.
I think if you pay attention even just a little bit to what's going on with these offers, you can tell where they're really trying to improve for next year. They're trying to bring in a wide receiver 3 or 4. They've offered 2 guys through the portal, and they're trying to add depth to the D line, and they want another piece on that secondary.
We
Like,
absolutely need another piece in that secondary.
I would agree. I think this Tony kid would really be huge because I think we have our starters right now. I mean, you have Verdone, you have Cooper, you have Freiler, you have Williams, and you have Miles Purchase. But as those 3 safeties played all 12 games in their entire career?
Yeah,
Like,
this year
they're
showed
always
like our two worst games in like as a defense were when we were down secondary guys and we just got picked apart.
so I think I don't know if he would start. I think he would get a lot of snaps, and maybe he just plays half of the reps to give Verdone and Freiler, like, well, I guess Freiler's gonna play every game. That guy's a man, but like Verdone and Cooper, like they're gonna help him out and hopefully sure up less beatings during the game. So I love where they're going at in the transfer portal. That makes me super excited for a group that's now bringing back 20 of 22 starters right now. Knock on wood, nobody's entered the portal. That can definitely happen this day and age in college football, but I absolutely love the direction they're going in right now. And maybe by the time this video comes out, they're offering a couple more guys. Lastly, we don't want to talk about 2024 too much, but I want to go over the schedule because I get excited when I talk about it. The home games and the Big 12 games are out. There's no dates or nothing like that, but your home games are for next year. Texas Tech, who's coming off of a disappointing 6-win season. They are bringing in a top 10 recruiting class for next year. Baylor, who just picked up DeQuan Finn, the Toledo dual threat quarterback. I think he's going to be exciting for them. Kansas State, Avery Johnson's coming to Ames for the first time. I am very excited for that. Cincinnati, I think, is going to be a little improved. I'm not a big Satterfield guy, but Cincinnati, that's a good opportunity to win at home. And UCF is also coming to, I think that's the first time those 2 programs have played each other. They picked up KJ Jefferson out of Arkansas. I am super excited for that game. I think all 5 of those home games, Justin, listing those off, are you pretty happy with that? I think those are they're number one, they're all winnable. Like you could go undefeated in Big 12 play next year, but I think some of the brands that are coming to town are going to be fun.
Yeah, no, just the brands and the matchups are going to be a ton of fun. I don't really put a whole lot of stake. I mean, how tough your schedule is, honestly, is way bigger than people put stock into and is a big indicator in what your record ends up being. But I try not to put too much, emphasis over what the strength of the schedule is going to be going into the year. Because obviously, I think a lot of people said Iowa State was going to have like the toughest Big 12 schedule this year. And we caught a lot of breaks. I mean, I'm going to be honest, like the schedule ended up being pretty favorable for us.
Which we didn't think was going to be when the season first started.
No, we didn't think that was going to be the case at all. So like looking at the schedule, it looks like it could be really favorable for us. And honestly, it might end up being that way. But I mean, with the Big 12, as we know, like these teams change so much every year, and the margin of error between teams is so slim. Like, so it's hard to get super excited about the schedule. I mean, looking at some of those games, at Kansas is going to be really fun. At Utah is going to be really tough. And then a lot of those good matchups, getting them in Jack Trice is going to be really big for us.
Yep. The 2 non-con games at home, Arkansas State and North Dakota. Those are just, you are wiping the floor with both of those schools. I'm telling you right now. Arkansas State's a horrible Sun Belt team. Your away games, like we talked about, you got Iowa, Houston, Utah, Kansas, could be in Arrowhead, could be in the new David Booth, nobody knows, and at West Virginia. So, Justin, to put a bow on this recap, we know in college football now with the transfer portal era, teams can change so much in the next 7 months. Give me a quick prediction. What do you think? I should change it this way. What do you think the line should be set at for over-unders for wins for Iowa State next year? That's a better question than you giving me a record prediction.
It's going to be higher than I would like it to be.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, it's
I got one in my head.
It's probably going to be at 8 games.
Yep, 8.5. That's where I had it. I have it at 8.5.
And if it's I don't know. We've had 1 9-win season in like my entire lifetime, 2 9-win seasons in my lifetime. So it would be pretty difficult for me to take that over.
Yeah.
I think if we were 7-6 this year, but it kind of felt like that record was a little better than some of the low moments we had. I think even if we went 8-4 next year, that would still be improving. But honestly, like, yeah, we don't have Arizona or Colorado, do we? Those are
Nope.
both teams who are looking
Arizona
to be pretty
State.
good.
We don't have TCU. We don't have Oklahoma State. Those are 5 schools that are going to be bringing back a lot. And
At
BYU might be
Utah,
better.
at Utah could be the toughest place to play in the
That
conference
will
next
be.
year.
That will be the
But
toughest game.
outside of that, based off of this year, I mean, the sky's the limit for this team if they can improve this offseason. I mean, the hype's probably going to get higher than I would like for it to be. But I mean, Big 12, like making the Big 12 championship is completely realistic for this team.
Yep. And I don't want to get too big into the rabbit hole for next year because we will do more preseason stuff as we move along. But I actually think I said 8.5, but I bet the over under set at 8 and it's more juiced. Like over under 8 wins would be like -1. I don't know, 140. Probably looking at the schedule right now would be my guess is probably what you'll see rather because like you said, what have we had? I think 2 9-win seasons in our entire history of a program. So that's the odds don't stack against us. That was perfectly well said, perfectly well wrapped up. We are going to cover you guys throughout the off season. Not sure consistently what we'll do, maybe if there's a big pickup in the portal or the recruiting stuff is kind of getting said and done in the spring. Maybe we'll cover you guys then. Maybe we'll give you guys a little. We're going to the spring game this year, Justin. We'll give everybody a little insight of what you can catch.
You're at the spring game last year.
Yeah, we did go to the spring game last year.
Honestly, felt like we learned a lot about the team from the spring game. We should definitely go and do that again.
Our starting quarterback from this year was playing.
I'm aware, but Rocco looked really good at the time, and a lot of the other guys, like, I mean, how the guys looked in spring is kind of how they looked like at the beginning of the season. So,
very true, very true. Justin, before we get out of here, I asked you last time. I'm going to ask you again. You've already predicted the matchup. Give me a championship score for Michigan and Washington, which will be set to be an absolutely fantastic football game.
Am I allowed to look up what the over-under is?
Over-under is 55, I believe. Michigan is favored by 4.5. I think that's what I have on the top of my head.
I think Michigan's going to win, and I would say it's probably going to be, I'll say 27-21.
27-21. All right. Michigan's going to have to keep it low scoring to win the football game. But I will give you that later on this week's episode of Play the Fight Song podcast. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in all year. You might not hear from us for a little bit, but we will be back to talk more Iowa State football as we always love to do. Appreciate you guys following us along all season long. This has been an absolute blast. 2023 didn't end the way we wanted to, but I think the sky is the limit, like Justin said, for 2024. And this group will be fun to talk about for 8 straight months. And it's only going to get me more excited as we continue to move along for an absolute great season in 2024. As always, tune in to our podcast, Play the Fight Song, on Apple, Spotify, or our full episodes are on YouTube. Please subscribe and follow along all off season as we will be covering college football every single week. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. We will talk to you again soon. If not, if you don't hear from us for a while, you always know what it is. Go Cyclones.